Hi, I'm Summer.
And my name is Josh, and I'm the wine director here at Vineagogo, and I've been challenged with a bit of a wine event. I'll let Summer tell you the details of it before we jump into the activities.
As we all know, most of us know, Josh is like a great sommelier, I guess. So, so I want to test him to see if he can tell the difference between a 2-buck chuck from Trader Joe's and another basic wine from the same region.
2-buck chuck is infamous because I call it a Russian roulette wine. You have to often buy a case of it because you never know what you're going to get. 4 bottles will usually be very good. 4 bottles I wouldn't dare cook with, and then 4 bottles are your Russian roulette. So it's a good wine, and hopefully it's representative. And I say, bring it on. Let's get this started.
I didn't buy a case, so hopefully we got one of the Russian roulette bottles.
You'll know by my face when I react.
Okay, and then talk to us about it too. Tell us like what you smell, that stuff.
Okay. So as a sommelier, we're trained to blind taste and be able to deduce wines down to the alcohol content, to the region where it was from, to the quality level that the wine is, and that was a Vineagogo fan for anybody who was wondering. He's going to the back to get some wine.
He's like,
but to varying levels, we are trained to get the grape type. We're trained to talk if it's a blend or not. The sugar levels, if it's totally dry, and these are all things you have to do in a test format. Is in a very, very time-constricted format. Often we're only given 4 to 5 minutes per wine, so you really have to be focused. You really have to pay attention to what you're talking about as you're going through the wine, and then hopefully come to a conclusion you're confident in. It's also why you get the joke that I haven't screwed up a blind tasting since lunch, because it's a very difficult thing to do, and our senses are fickle. So we'll start off with the whites, pardon my reach. So I'll start off with 2A and 2B. And I don't know if you can notice this on the camera, but just looking at the wines, there's a distinct difference in color, with 2A being a much deeper gold than 2B, which is more of like a brassy color with hints of green. This can all lead you in certain directions right off the bat. It can imply that the wine might have spent time in wood. It can imply that the wine maybe is a little older, maybe a little richer, maybe a little possibly more New World in style with higher alcohol, things like that. And this is all just stuff on the site. You want to make sure it's clear, that there's nothing in it floating around like chunks of cork or sediment, because that can be not the greatest thing when you're actually tasting the wine. Then when you actually smell it, and when we are tasting, usually we do one wine at a time. You don't go back and forth like this, but since it is a comparison between 2-buck chuck and another wine, it's good to compare back and forth. 2A, for example, I get a lot of different things, a mixture of stuff, of notes that I would get associated with wood, a wine that has spent time in oak, as well as some characteristics I would define as like terroir, something that would come from the soil that the wine is from. Caramel, vanilla, a little nutmeg and cinnamon mixed in with pears, ripe pears, and a little pineapple, not too much pineapple, and then also like a green apple. Whereas you go to 2B, and you've got a mixture of fruit flavors in that. You've got citrus mixed in with those tree and stone fruit that I talked about, a little bit of pear, but mostly like lemons, limes, a touch of like bitter grapefruit, not a whole lot of oakiness to speak of. Like a touch of a floral note, white flowers comes to mind for me. And like I said, not a whole lot of oakiness to speak of. And then moving on to tasting the wine. I know I just committed a crime to most of you by spitting out wine, but sometimes it's got to be done, especially when it's 8:30 in the morning on a Monday. This wine is dry, and when I say dry, I mean I still taste fruit flavors, but there's no sugar. It doesn't tickle my tongue like if you just take a spoonful of sugar and put it in your mouth. There's a difference, and I think that's very important with wine because, go ahead and taste it. We're friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fruitiness in a wine is often mistaken for sweetness. So there's definitely a distinct difference. Another thing I noticed, which I think Summer just hinted at a little bit by her reaction, is it's a little hot. There's alcohol definitely in this wine. You taste the fruit and the wood. I have a theory in my head as to what grape I think it is, and where it might be from and what style it is. Moving on to 2B. A continuation of the nose, very stark contrast between the two wines, with this being the richer, the more polished, the more vibrant, a lot more going on. This tends to go a little watery on the palate. There is nice fruit there, the citrus fruit, but it is lacking a little bit in, I guess, depth is how I would define it. It kind of just does that, as opposed to the first wine, which was really streamlined and big and bold and in-your-face kind of wine. Again, I don't think there's a whole lot of oak to this. There might be a little bit, but
Sorry. Is it okay to share wine like that?
yes.
Okay.
Well, it's all about personal preference and how comfortable you are, but wine with its alcohol in it is kind of a natural antiseptic.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Anyways, so it tends to cleanse, but don't quote me on that. I'm not a doctor, but as long as you're comfortable with the person next to you you're sharing it with. As far as moving along with the sommelier tasting thing, at this point, after you've gone down the palate and when the wine's in your mouth and talked about, we have to talk about acidity levels, we have to talk about alcohol. With acidity, it's how much your mouth waters. Alcohol, for me, is generally, if you ever had a vodka shot, that burn in your chest, if it tickles your nostrils, a heat sensation. We have to talk about complexity in the wine, how much stuff I talked about. Is there a lot going on, or is there a little? And then how long the finish is, how long you taste the flavor. After that, you go to what's called an initial conclusion, which is where you say, I think this wine is from the New World. New World being more modern winemaking areas like the United States, New Zealand, South America, as opposed to Old World, which is more of Europe. And there's definitely a distinct style difference between the two. Talk about the country you might think it's from. In this case, I think both of these are from the United States, just because one of them is 2-buck chuck. And I've yet to run into a 2-buck chuck from another country, but don't quote me on that either. Cool climate versus warm climate. If there's a lot of sun, the grape and wine is going to taste different than if there's a little bit of sun and it's kind of stressing itself to get ripe to make good wine. And then quality level and vintage. What year you think it's from, and if you think it's good or if you think it's 2-buck chuck. And then finally, you come with your final conclusion where you say, I think this is a 2009 Charles Shaw California Chardonnay from a questionable quality producer. And then that would be your final conclusion, and you'd move on. I think if I were to guess, just off initial reaction, I would think 2B is Charles Shaw, just because it tends to be a little leaner and a little less crazy on the palate. And I would think 2A is a Chardonnay from another producer. If it is indeed still Charles Shaw, that guy's doing something crazy, and I'm going to go buy a case in a little while.
We should have sound effects.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get a little bell? Ding! So that's your final conclusion?
I just think this has too much polished kind of oak and fruit to be a wine that they could sell for $2, whereas that had a little watery component to it, and
It wasn't as good as this one either.
you tasted it when you're sitting here next to me. There's a big difference.
Do you want to see, or do you want to try?
Let's wait till the end. Let's wait till the end. Oh, the second wine.
Yeah.
My initial conclusion is New World on that. It is, I believe, Chardonnay would be my guess for grape.
So you'd say both of these are a Chardonnay, or you would just say this 2A is a Chardonnay?
I think 2A is a Chardonnay. I think 2B is has aromatics and whatnot that might suggest a Chardonnay that hasn't seen any wood.
Do Chardonnays usually see wood?
Usually Chardonnay spends time in oak barrels, smaller barrels. That's where you get the buttery flavor, the vanilla-y flavors, the caramel and the butterscotch. That's from time that the wine actually spent inside a wooden barrel.
How long do Chardonnays usually sit in a wooden barrel?
Depends on region. It depends on where it's